After being canceled due to COVID last year, the iconic Spoleto Festival will return for an exciting year in 2021. I talk exclusively with Festival Director Nigel Redden for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook.
Nigel Redden, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
It's great to be talking to you again.
Oh.
It sort of feels like the festival's about to happen.
I appreciate that, and we're so excited that it's coming back.
I have to say, it's such a relief that we're doing live performances after this year of not seeing live performances. It's been really, really tough.
How much time did you give yourself to make this right?
Well, actually, we've been giving ourselves time after time after time because we thought last year when we canceled the festival that there would be no way that the pandemic would be going on the way it has. We thought that it would be over by May of 2021, and instead it wasn't. So in August we had a very full festival, and then we sort of shrank it. In September and October and November it got a little smaller, and finally in January was when we really knew that we had to be outside for most of the performances. And in some ways our timing is slightly off this year because I think by the end of the summer it will be possible to be back in theaters and really to have a full audience in a theater. But at the end of May of 2021 we really can't have full audiences inside. So most of our performances will be outside in this year.
And how many of those performances will be actually outside?
Well, of the 70 performances that we're having live, I think about 60% will be outside. We're only doing chamber music inside at the Dock Street Theatre, and we're limiting the audience pretty significantly, so it's only 116 people in a 465-seat house.
Yes, indeed. And let me turn to some developing news. The festival has revealed the 2021 season poster featuring the work of American photographer Joanne Verberg. Let me ask you this: how does her use of color, composition, and varying focus match Spoleto?
Well, actually, I mean, in some ways, what she does is she makes these trees, olive trees, come alive in a way that most of us wouldn't see. I mean, she sometimes makes them explode with energy, which is not the way most of us look at trees. We don't see them exploding with energy.
Right.
But the thing that really is important to me about Joanne's work is that there are many things that are important to me, but one of them is that she has taken these photographs in Spoleto, Italy. Mm-hmm. So the olive tree that is going to be featured in the poster this year is from Spoleto, Italy, and in some ways it's about reclaiming our past. That we obviously started as a festival affiliated with the Festival of Two Worlds in Spoleto,
right.
And having that connection in 2021 seems to me important because we are sort of reviving the festival after the only cancellation in the history of the festival in 2020, and having a festival that is represented by this wonderful olive tree. The olive trees always last for a long time. They are very old trees. In some cases in Italy there are trees that are as much as 1,000 years old, and they continue to produce olives, and it's something that's very rich in the tradition of Italian cuisine. It's very rich in the tradition of sort of Italian culture and certainly Italian landscape. So I feel that this is totally appropriate for this year's festival.
What particular performance reclaims your past?
This year, I think the performances that provide continuity for us are always the chamber music performances. Chamber music was something that began actually in the second festival in Italy in 1959, but has always been part of Spoleto Festival USA since we started in 1977. And the artists who are coming are people who have in some ways been coming for many, many years. The St. Lawrence String Quartet is celebrating 25 years of coming to the festival. Jeff Nuttall has been our artistic director for chamber music for many, many years. But chamber music is a kind of through line, but there's so many things that are I don't know, that sort of proclaim the past and the present and the future of Spoleto. One of the pieces that I really want to celebrate is Jason Moran and Alicia Hall Moran's Two Wings. They are celebrating, in fact, one of the cornerstones of American music. It's impossible to think about American music of all sorts without thinking about the influence that African musicians had, that Africans who were enslaved in America, the influence that they had on American music. And they brought with them rhythms that were new to the Europeans who enslaved them. They brought with them a culture that has been extraordinarily resilient. I mean, how people survived slavery and maintained a culture is something that I think is worthy of an enormous amount of, one, gratitude, but also respect that people managed to do that. And what Two Wings is going to be is a celebration of the culture that moved north during the Great Migration, when so many African Americans decided that they could no longer live in the South, and they moved to Detroit, they moved to Chicago, they moved to New York, and brought with them different kinds of music and influenced music. Well, still a huge influence in music today.
And what exactly is Spoleto's influence on American music?
Well, that's a broad question, and one of the things that I feel that I don't know whether we influence American music or whether we simply reflect American music, but we certainly celebrate American music. And one of the things that I think has happened in the last, I don't know, well, certainly in the last 20, 30 years, during much of Spoleto's history, is that the places from which composers are taking inspiration have been enlarged. So it is not, certainly the Great Migration and African influence is enormously important, but now we also have influences from South America, we have influences from the Caribbean, we have influences from Asia, Japan, China, and I think that this is something that is particularly American. I mean, I don't know about your lineage. My background is a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of the other thing. And I think that that's part of what America is. And it doesn't mean it's a melting pot necessarily, because I do think that we are aware of the different aspects. But it does mean that it's a place where these influences come together and somehow sometimes meld, sometimes collide with each other.
Sure.
And I think that that's enormously rich, enormously important, and enormously fertile.
And what are those aspects that you keep thinking about?
Well, I suppose every year I keep thinking about new things. I mean, this year we were supposed to be celebrating with the premiere of Omar, which was going to be an opera that the festival commissioned from Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels.
Sure.
And because of COVID, we're not doing it this year. But I think about it a lot, and we are doing a workshop to move the project forward. And it's a very Charleston project. It's a project that should happen here because Omar ibn Said, who the opera celebrates, was a man who was brought to Charleston in chains in 1807, which was the last year in which Africans could be legally enslaved in the United States. He was one of that last group that came. He was a scholar. He knew the Quran well. He was a Muslim. He wrote in Arabic, wrote his autobiography in 1831 in Arabic. And it's a story that I found absolutely fascinating. And I think Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels are the perfect people to tell that story in music, because Rhiannon has explored some of the earliest notation of music sung by Africans in the New World. She's incorporated that, and she's incorporated also music that she grew up with in North Carolina.
Yes.
But she's got a very contemporary feel to it. And Michael, I think, has brought in all kinds of other influences, that could be Arabic, could be Egyptian, depending on how one interprets this. And I just think, again, this is something very rich and something that is very much about Charleston and very much about what the Spoleto Festival USA should be about.
And what else are you exploring when it comes to that?
Sorry?
What else are you exploring when it comes to that?
Well, I mean, we obviously also do a lot of dance and a lot of theater. So this year we actually have a kind of a wonderful sort of bookends in dance. With Caleb Teicher is bringing his company at the beginning of the festival, and is kind of a wonderful master of tap dance. And tap dance is something that is particularly American,
yes.
And it has gotten a kind of renaissance recently. There's real interest in tap dance. At the end of the festival, we have Efrat Ashry's company.
Yes.
She's a young choreographer who is using voguing and street dance and various other kinds of idiomatic dance, and incorporating that in a kind of joyous way. And in between these two bookends, we have a different kind of dance, which is ballet. Is obviously has Western European roots, but also is a the United States changed ballet, certainly with the work of George Balanchine and with the work of many others, and we will be doing a certain amount of Jerome Robbins choreography during this ballet celebration in the middle of the festival, as well as works by Balanchine. And it is very much an American celebration, although with roots that are very different from the roots that Caleb Teicher would acknowledge, or that Efrat Ashry would acknowledge. And all of this is going to be done outdoors at Rivers Green, because because of COVID,
right.
we're trying to be very careful, both with the health of obviously people on stage, the crew that's next to the stage, and of course the audience.
Right.
I mean, we do not want, in any circumstance, to become a kind of a spreader event.
Right.
We want this to be a kind of celebration of people coming together after this very, very, very difficult year.
I'm going to get to that in just a second, but how has Spoleto changed ballet?
Well, I think that I don't know whether Spoleto has changed ballet, but we've certainly been part of the changing in ballet that has become much more, I don't know, the ballet has incorporated other forms in a way that it incorporated street forms of dance in a way that would not have been really thinkable 40 years ago. That choreographers now, even someone who is steeped in ballet tradition, like I don't know. I mean, so some of the younger choreographers that are rising now know about street dancing, know about capoeira, know about other forms of dance that they wouldn't have thought about previously. There's a different way of dancers to partner. There are different ideas about partnership in dance, so that it's not simply a man and a woman. It can be two men, it can be two women. It really does has changed significantly, and in a very positive way that I think reflects a much more open embrace of the diversity in society, and by diversity I mean whether it's racial diversity, gender diversity, romantic diversity, what have you.
And what are those other forms that you're really discovering to this day?
Well, I think that one of the things that I find fascinating is that we can look at parts of the world where that we didn't really, that we thought there was art and then there was ethnic art. And now I think that idea has been abandoned completely. I mean, that we are no longer saying, okay, oh, that's ethnic, that's something else. That it's all art, and that we can look at whether it's kabuki in Japan or whether we're looking at kunshu in China. These are very sophisticated art forms. If we look at the traditions in West Africa, again we're looking at sophisticated art forms that people have developed in ways that are, I think, revealing about the human discourse, and that is what the arts are about someone telling someone else, giving someone else a message, giving someone else some insight into what it is that they believe is important as human beings.
What are those sophisticated art forms that have been trickled down to the north and the south?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether trickling down is how I would say it, but I mean, certainly when I was talking to the new president of the College of Charleston last night, I saw him, and we were talking about, we ended up talking about The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a book that every Chinese teenager reads, and that I'm no longer a teenager, but that I just read the other day. And it's a long book about the end of the Han Dynasty, and it's a kind of a romance novel in the sense that it's filled with battles. I mean, his wife said that she didn't really like it, but he liked it. So that it's one of those things that boys read more than girls, and I think it provides a tremendous insight into the way in which now Chinese films are made, where you find people flying. Right. You find these extraordinary scenes in which people can do amazing things in battle. And in some ways, in Western European history, there's the Knights of the Round Table and so on. But in this Chinese history, there's this sense of the wonderment of the battles that took place at that time. This is the 2nd century AD, so 1800 years ago, and it really still reverberates. And I think that's what's so exciting about the arts, that somehow something gets rediscovered and it becomes part of how an artist thinks about the world today. So that the story of Omar ibn Said, which was not well known, is now becoming, I think, better known because Rhiannon and Michael are going to create this opera, and I think it will become part of the things that we all know about, and that I think is something that Spoleto can do and should do, and is kind of wonderful when that happens.
Now let me get back to the health. Obviously, the announcement follows months of considering planning for the health and well-being of artists, staff, and audience members, conducted in accordance, that is, with local and national healthcare guidelines, as well as recommendations from the team of healthcare professionals at the MUSC. What was that process like when it came to considering planning?
Well, MUSC has been really terrific. I mean, they've been really, really generous with their time and their expertise, and they've been really super to deal with. And it's been a kind of dynamic process where, what 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I think things were really very different than they are now. I don't know about you, but I'm vaccinated, and I feel a huge weight is off my shoulders because I don't feel that I'm at risk of giving someone COVID-19, nor do I feel that I'm at risk of getting it. And what that has changed the protocols somewhat. However, we developed protocols with the idea that the disease is very dangerous, that some people, too many people have died from it. Some others have become this long COVID, which is frightening, where people remain sick for a long time, and that's the last thing we want to have happen to anyone involved. And we were talking to artists in January, and they were particularly grateful that we had these rather strict guidelines where we will test everyone, including those who've been vaccinated once a week.
Right.
People who have not been vaccinated will be tested more often. If they have if people come down with COVID, they will be quarantined. People around them will be quarantined, so that there's tracking of who's with whom.
Right.
We've kept each theatre separate from every other theatre, so that the people who are backstage at Rivers Green don't work at the bus shed.
Right.
The people at the bus shed don't work at the cistern, and
Right.
so on. And so, I mean, we've got this kind of separation, which I think is going to be very important, and very important for our audiences as well. I mean, the audiences will be asked to wear masks, and they will be in pods so that they're not close. People who are living together,
Right.
a couple will be separate from another couple. I mean, although people can come in groups of 4, in some cases groups of 6,
Right.
where they have a kind of family relationship. So we've tried to make it as safe as we can. I mean, nothing in life is 100% safe, but we've tried to make it really we've been very conscious of the safety of artists, audience, crew, staff, what have you.
Sorry, it's so windy out here. But let me ask you this: what will be the actual tracing system like here at Spoleto?
Well, what we do is, it's clear that you and I are now sitting next to each other.
Right.
If we interact for 15 minutes, we will, this is something that we will have a contact, we'll trace contacts. If I were to become sick, I will be in touch with you,
Right.
to let you know that I've been sick and that we've been in touch. So so you can take appropriate precautions, and vice versa, if you became sick. We will trace where I have been, the people that I've been in touch with. In the office, we wear masks. At backstage, we'll be wearing masks. People who are on stage will not be wearing masks in most cases. For dancers, it's particularly difficult.
Yes.
Because dancing is a breathing
Right. That's what I'm saying.
And there's also the question that and one of the issues that is going to be very real at this year's festival is that many of the artists will not have performed for a year, and this will be the first time that they perform. So in the case of dancers, they will be slightly out of shape, and it will be, they're getting into shape now.
And I know that the attendees travel from 49 states and 16 countries. How many regionally are going to travel here?
Regionally, we get an audience that comes from, a lot of audience comes from Atlanta, from Columbia, from Greenville, from Charlotte, and I assume that it will be the same this year.
And I know obviously COVID has impacted a whole lot. What will be the economic impact for COVID for Spoleto?
Well, the last year we ended with a deficit, a larger deficit than we've ended with in years and years, and this year we're looking at a large deficit as well. Our donors, our board, have been very generous, but our box office will be maybe 20% of what it would typically be, however, it is important for us to be back on stage. It's important for us to be back with an audience. We want to be on stage. We want the audience to come. And even though we will have a deficit, it's just important that we're back.
And obviously, this is your last 36 years. Who is Nigel Redden now versus 36 years ago?
What an interesting question. I was thinking about trying to remember what it was like when I first came in 1986, the first festival that I did in 1986, and I remember being not. I remember depending on other members of the staff to make the festival happen that year, and the staff and board were very supportive of the fact that I was a little vague about exactly, sort of what was necessary. And if there's anything that's been a through line through it all, it's that the staff has been really extraordinarily important and extraordinarily dedicated. One of the something that I say at various times is that my job is to take credit for other people's work, and I say that as a kind of a joke on some level, but there's truth to it as well. That is that I'm in many ways the face of the festival, but the festival depends on the work of many people who don't get a kind of public credit, and it is very much a team effort, and it's a wonderful, wonderful team. The team has been, it has changed over the years, but many members of the team have remained with us for years and years.
Yes.
So that I think Tasha Gandhi, who is our CFO, started as my assistant.
Wow.
It was just after Hurricane Hugo, so it was 1990, and she didn't remain my assistant for long because she realized that there were other things to do, and so she's had many jobs at the festival, but she's been with us for almost all that time. So that's 31 years, and Julia Forster, who is our director of development, started in 1996, and she reminds me of. We happened to both be on a plane coming down from New York together, and it was a 6 a.m. flight, and we were sitting across the aisle from each other, and I said, well, now's a good time to start. Let's go through the list.
Yes.
And she nonetheless, in spite of that, she remained with us. Jessie Bagley, who's our director of marketing and PR, is started off as an intern, as an apprentice, and has stayed with us and risen through the ranks, and she's been fabulous. Nicole Taney, who is the director of artistic planning and operations, has been with us now for 7 years, and it seems like just the other day she started. And our director of production, Mike East, started off again as an apprentice, and has been with us, I think, now for 11 years in various different positions, although this will be his first full festival as director of production. And so on. I could go through the list of staff members who have, many of whom have started off as volunteers, apprentices, in a kind of let's say, and have moved through the ranks. And I think that I actually started off as a volunteer in Spoleto, Italy in 1969. So there's been an opportunity for people to move through the ranks, which I think is wonderful, and it means that there's a kind of, I don't know, a kind of a joint love for the festival and a sense of ownership that many people have, and that I hope you have too.
Oh yes.
Because I feel that the festival belongs to so many people in such different ways. I think one of the things that I love about your background, Quintin, is that you were one of those children who is in that picture, or that's there on
East Side.
on America and Reed Street, and it's. I know it was, you were taken by chance by David Hammonds, who is one of the really distinguished visual artists of today, and he created that piece and wanted a whole bunch of children to be part of it, and I think that he wanted the children to represent the hope of the future, and there you are.
I hope
there you are, and I think you've done rather well. And so, I think this is all, it's sort of wonderful that there's that sense of people having been part of it for, I don't know how old you were in that photograph.
Oof. Gosh, that was in the elementary school at Fraser then. So yeah, that was like in the early '90s.
So you must have been what,
Six,
six, seven? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you, all of you in that photograph are looking up. I mean, you were told, I'm sure,
Right.
look up.
Right.
You didn't know what you were looking at, but you're looking at that flag.
Right.
And I think there's something so positive about that. And so, I mean, it makes me quite emotional to see that picture and to see you all. And there've been many iterations because we've had to renew that poster many times.
Wow.
Because it fades in the sun. And I think that's perhaps what Spoleto represents more than anything else. It's this sense of the hope of the future.